Hi guys, this is Chris. Turns out there's more than Neil Gaiman stuff that happened after the first video. It's a bit late on this. I've been busy with the Doom Train Indiegogo stuff. Saw this as like, I do a follow-up video. I'm going to start delaying these a little bit to make sure I can get everything into one video at this point. I'm going to start this video with, I'm not a big fan of Neil. I looked at some of his comics, and to say they weren't my cup of tea is kind of like an understatement. I hear The Sandman is good, but I also hear the guy wrote gay, pedophile, fan fiction stuff, and we just don't really need that stuff. All this child predator stuff needs to be purged, like that Purge movie, or aborted into space or something. That stuff's just awful, man. Anyway, what started this drama was when Neil was defending the hiring of new artists who, from what I heard, has done quite well in this Hulk run, causing, of course, COMICSGATE to attack someone doing well in comics. As always, Richard claimed no one is hired by Marvel just being pulled off the street, but the problem is they really do just hire anyone, and that's kind of the problem. They just hired Zoe Quinn. Now, Zoe Quinn was hired with no comic experience after the Gamergate controversy for the sake of promoting controversy within COMICSGATE, which is something I'll probably talk about at a later time. Gamergate is kind of like its own thing. I'll have to go into that. She did like a Kickstarter scam. She scammed a bunch of people, I think. I'll do like a little bit about that. So really, there's basically will just hire anyone off the street to write comic books for Marvel. Or at least, they hired a number of people off the street. Like Diversity hires a great number of them. And Richard himself was actually published by Image Comics, so I mean, the guy probably has a pretty good understanding of what he's actually talking about here. I mean, they basically published him. They really do just publish anyone off the street. It's crazy. But that's really kind of like the problem, like with a lot of these publishers, they don't really hire good writers, I mean, they have people who are good writers, but they don't really hire, like, people based on merit or skill or anything like that. Instead, they just hire, just around anyone just laying around to write comic books. So they really will just hire, any druggie off the street to write comics for Marvel. They hired a black girl just because she has black hair for the Iron Man comic book. And the guy Neil was defending, I don't know his name, I think it's I. It's like an Asian name or something like that. And he promoted mini comics, and so like the comics community, they started talking about like things like how they got started and all this. They started like counter the claims made by Richard. Some of them are hyperbole, some of them maybe not so much. One of the better comics I've seen was a comic from Scott Snyder, who basically claims he was hired by DC Comics after teaching writing classes, which is also really great advice. I mean, if you want to write comic books, take some writing classes, He did that great New 52 Batman run with the Court of the Owls and all that. So he's a pretty good writer. So, like, if you want to write comic books for me, or you want to just get into comic books or anything like that, I mean, that's sort of the direction you should go into, just take, writing classes, look into it. I mean, you could be hired by Marvel, just picked up off the street just like anyone else. Say if you wanted to write for me, go in with inspiration from Jeff Loeb or Scott Snyder. So most people don't even know what good comic book writing is, and those are just good places to start. And that's really kind of all the point of this drama with this Neil Gaiman thing is good comic book writing. The lack of it destroyed Marvel and DC, and you can really see the up and coming new talent just isn't as good. It's all it just isn't up to par as what the greats of sort of the comic book past are. Now, if you missed my previous video about this, I really suggest going and checking that out as COMICSGATers try to start saying that Neil Gaiman basically doesn't remember his own life by citing a wiki page as a source. And I don't know, I think that, a primary source clearly beats out a secondary source, but the whole thing is just crazy. Anyway, that was the other video. But the motivation for this stuff is always monetary. You can see some comic samples that was done by Richard. And the weird thing about these is that, they're not very good. The artwork writing is kind of, not that great, even amateurish. And as soon as people from, the comic book industry, various pros he kind of, ragged on with some of his videos, started pointing back that, hey, you, this, kind of crappy comic thing you did over here, kind of like Karma or Revenge or whatever. Many of these people who work in the industry are just kind of, firing back at this guy at this whole thing. And he basically claims his little bad comic book short was done by a fan artist, right? And that's sort of quotation marks, pros are attacking the fans. But the thing is, like, the fan comic doesn't have any credits listed for the people that were working on it, which is very strange. If you look at, like, anything I've done, like comic shorts or anything of that kind, you can always see the credits of the people that worked on the comic. The artwork is showing, I'll always say, like, the names of, like, the person credited, letter, artist, whatever. And, you know, this is, like, fan artwork that was, like, lettered by DNC and has some unnamed artist on it that he's, like, seemingly taking credit for, and that's kind of suspicious, because why is there not actually a name on it, you know? So they're basically criticizing this fan comic, in quotation marks, from a guy who basically talks about, like, making good comic books again and all of this stuff here, and yet he's not really, like, sort of walking the walk, and he's kind of getting, like, upset a little bit about it. So he's basically going out and starting stuff with other comic book creators. Like, it's not, you know, basically going after someone like Neil Gaiman or a person who's seemingly doing well on sort of the comics narrative to create sort of like a, trying to think of a good way to put it, kind of like a narrative. Like, if someone is doing good, you basically have to create sort of like a narrative against that person to make it say, like, that person is bad or something of that nature, to cover up the fact that, like, maybe you don't have the best artist, or maybe you don't have, like, the best talent on your side. And all this craziness is this, like, Richard guy used this fans unsolicited artwork, and he's claiming to change the comic industry, right? And he's directing his followers to provoke, not like E. Ewing and Neil, from people who've worked for Marvel and DC and are, like, basically making names for themselves. And, like, this whole thing is just insane. I mean, I know there's an up-and-coming culture war, and I damn well know I lack the reach to actually affect on anything in that. I'm trying my best here, you know, harder than anyone else can dare claim. I mean, I made some pretty amazing comic books, and no matter how good of a comic book I made, you know, I'm not going to be able to really reach the impact that, you know, the growing culture war stuff going on is going to keep growing and escalating, right? Like, right now, you got a YouTuber guy who makes videos attacking comic books with a knife. You got a guy who says he's wants to get his sugar on, that picks up buttholes every time Rodriguez comes up in a live stream. So there's nothing COMICSGATers will see from the ringleaders that they won't support doing. And at this point, it's just going to escalate the violence with a victim narrative of the COMICSGATE or something like that. I mean, it's going to be, like, engrossing just more and more just garbage, you know? Like, this drama, then the next drama, and all of it to just sort of, like, just take money from people, you know? So, I want to ask you guys, like, what do you think of this situation? Go down and comment in the comment section below, and tell me what you think. You think Neil's right? You like DNC? Comment in the section below. This comic stuff's pretty crazy, and just not enough stuff just showing this stuff going on, you know? Like, when they do their videos, they always portray themselves as sort of like, oh, we're the ones being attacked, or some shit like that. But often, it's provocated the other way around. And they use alt accounts when they sort of create these altercations. So, everyone take care, and have a good night.